Wonderful. Thank you everybody for joining. My name is Molly Brutomesso, run customer success here at Wunderkind. Have the pleasure of knowing many of you, and many of you I look forward to meeting. Wanted to just start this off with saying thank you for taking the time. I know we always talk about in retail and how important Black Friday, Cyber Monday is to the business. But this year it feels almost different in that there's always been these sort of playbooks that change slightly, right? But with the state of the world and after last year, I think we all have our eyes on this cyber weekend to say, what is this? And what's going to happen? What's going to hold true from last year? What's going to be different this year? What are the dynamics at play, right? So we know it's midweek, but huge thank you for joining and chatting through with us what some of the trends and insights we have that will be shaping 2021. So we thank you for your partnership. We always look forward to these and being able to partner with you and making sure you guys are super successful. And I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful leaders that are going to lead you through some of these trends in this webinar, which is Megan Krasinski on our product marketing, Trey Arnold also on product marketing. We've got Andrea calling in from Nest, which is one of our fantastic partners, and Harry Bellata, who runs one of our CSM teams. And they are going to take you through some amazing trends and insights that we have coming into this cyber weekend.
Great. Thank you, Molly. So a quick few logistic items before we get started. During the webinar, you'll be in listen only mode, but if you have any questions, please feel free to utilize the Q&A feature. It's located at the bottom of your screen. We'll try to address your questions at the end, but if we do not have time, we'll follow up with you directly. We'll also share a recording of this webinar in case you want to revisit it or share with a colleague. So, as Molly mentioned, my name is Megan Krasinski. I am the Director of Product Marketing here at Wunderkind. Very excited to be leading this webinar today, live from 75, as we are calling our new webinar series. And that's because Trey and I are currently seated on the 75th floor of One World Trade Center in our Wunderkind headquarters in New York City. A little bit of a foggy day today, or else I'd give you guys a little preview of our scenery, but it is beautiful. We're also being joined virtually by my lovely colleague, Harry, as Molly mentioned, who is in our Indy office this week, as well as a very special appearance from Andrea Moore, who is the Senior Vice President of Digital at Nest New York. Trey, Harry, and Andrea will each introduce themselves later in the webinar. So we have some great content for you all today. Again, thank you for joining. I'll be kicking the webinar off reviewing last year's Cyber Weekend at a high level and how Cyber Weekend has evolved over the last few years. I'll then pass it over to Harry, who will talk through some insights on consumer behavior we've observed across our Wunderkind client base, and with input from Andrea on how Nest has adapted their strategies, especially with their increasingly mobile audience, which will be really exciting to hear directly from one of our client partners. Trey will then present on the importance of optimizing your abandonment programs during this time, followed by an insightful Q&A discussion with Andrea on ways marketers can optimize for the holidays and beyond. So let's get started. The first question we asked ourselves when preparing for the upcoming holiday season, and quite frankly, when putting together this webinar, was how has Black Friday, Cyber Monday changed over the last few years? And while we know there were monumental shifts in the world that, quite frankly, flipped the 2020 holiday season on its head, we did notice some of these shifts were well underway in the years prior. And I'll talk about that a bit more later in my section. So I think to no one's surprise, unless you're like me and barely even know what year it is anymore, last year was the biggest year on record for Cyber Weekend. And this was spurred by store closures and increasingly digital adoption that was obviously accelerated by the pandemic. So when it comes down to just how colossal this 2020 weekend was, I think the numbers speak for themselves. In fact, according to Adobe Analytics 2020 holiday report, shoppers spent $9 billion on Black Friday and nearly $11 billion on Cyber Monday, representing a substantial 15% jump from 2019. This jump was obviously much greater than analysts were expecting before the pandemic took hold, as 2019 was already a crazy successful year for e-commerce. So as we started digging into the data and took a step back and noticed that, we at Wunderkind took a step back and noticed that one of the trends that accelerated sales was this transformation into weekend-long shopping versus just the traditional Friday and Monday. So as you can see here in this chart, in 2018, over 50% of revenue occurred just on Friday and Monday. And now we are seeing more revenue evenly distributed across the entire Cyber weekend. In fact, 64% of our Wunderkind clients saw more revenue driven over Black Friday than Cyber Monday for the first time in Cyber Week history. And this is a trend we expect to continue into the 2021 holiday season. So this slide is interesting, and we thought it was really important to highlight. While total revenue was up, the proportional revenue driven over the 2020 Cyber weekend decreased. And this is largely due to the fact that many retailers started Cyber Week at the beginning of November, if not earlier. Cyber weekend made up about 5% of 2020's total digital revenue, down 9% from 2019's average. And I'll talk about the reasons more for this on the next slide. I'm sure this slide won't be a shocker to you, but a big part of this, as you could guess, was COVID-19. So COVID really accelerated e-commerce adoption. So November became less of a make or break month for many retailers. As I mentioned before, with store closures and increasingly digital adoption, COVID accelerated digital growth months before the Cyber holiday even occurred. So even with total digital revenue up over the holiday weekend, the increase in digital adoption led to less proportional revenue during this traditionally massive months. So I think we can all take this as an indication that shoppers have made e-com a normal part of their routine rather than just this once a year blowout. So as we look forward to the upcoming 2021 season, it's, probably the number one thing on everyone's mind in this webinar. The market is predicting another record-breaking holiday season. The year-over-year growth is expected to be less than the significantly high jump from 2019 to 2020. But regardless, it's still going to be an extremely important time for retailers to convert first-time shoppers and strengthen their existing relationships with their customers. Cool. So now that we've set the stage for the upcoming holiday season, I'm going to pass the mic over to Harry, who will lead us through some fascinating data on interesting consumer behaviors that shaped last year's record-breaking holiday season. So over to you, Harry.
Thank you, Megan. My name is Harry Bellotto. I am a director of customer success here at Wunderkind. For those of you I haven't met, I run a team of CSMs here, and I've been through more Black Friday, Cyber Mondays than I can count. And I am really excited to walk you all through some of the behavioral trends that we see during this period and how you can leverage that information to make really impactful strategies over this period of time. So we're going to go through the different conversion trends, the different traffic trends we see during Cyber Week and weekend. But first, we're going to start with a baseline of what a regular week looks like. So you can see here, we have a trending chart over a week where purple is desktop orders and yellow is phone orders. this is a typical week once again, and you see that during Monday through Friday, the work week, desktop orders really rule the 9 to 5, right? So while people are on their computers for work, they are sometimes shopping. And then we see in the afternoon that the phone orders really dominate the evening when the computer's closed and they're relaxing on the couch. This also carries into the weekend on Saturday and Sunday, where Sunday really takes home the phone order win, where most people are not on their computers and placing most of those Sunday scary orders, as I like to call them. So now that we know what a typical week looks like, how do these trends change over Cyber Week and Cyber Weekend? Right away, you can see a lot more yellow here, which means phone orders dominate this period. So basically, what we want to make sure that you see from this data is it's important to meet your audience where they are, which is on their phones. You can see all throughout Cyber Week, phone orders dominate every single period of time, with the exception of Monday 9 to 5, when people are back on their laptops working. And then the other interesting thing we see here is a really large spike Monday afternoon of those last minute shoppers. This is where I always fall every single year, trying to make sure I get my gifts in time before the offers are gone. And so once again, really making sure that your strategy is mobile first. Now that we know what conversions look like during this time, we also want to take a look at how traffic changes during this time and the different peak times. From this chart, once again, yellow is mobile visits and purple is desktop visits. But really the key thing we want to call out here is if you take a look at Friday and Saturday, the early afternoon, early day is really where we see peak traffic happening during this period. And this is really people coming to site, maybe not ready to purchase, but they want to see what your offers are. This is a really important audience to make sure that you're identifying while they're coming during this early period so that you can retarget them later on. The second bucket that's important to take a look at is Sunday and Monday. This is where we really see the end of the day peaking in terms of traffic. And these are people coming to site to make sure that they're not losing out on any expiring offers. This is where using your emails, your own channels, emails and text messaging are really important to make sure that you're messaging to those people. So when we take a step back and we zoom out, there's really two audiences we're talking about. So we have the early birds, which are those Friday and Saturday shoppers. And the messaging that works really well for these visitors is urgency around and scarcity around, get it before it sells out, right? Like if your offer isn't going to be changing over the period, let them know this is the best offer you're going to get and it's going to be gone, right? The second bucket is those procrastinators. So these are the people like myself who are waiting till the last minute, making sure we're getting the best offer and getting that offer before it expires. The kind of messaging that works really well here, and we'll go through some examples in a few moments, is our best deal ends soon, right? Countdown timers, making sure that they know exactly when this offer ends so that they can buy before it's gone is really critical. So now that we've taken a look at the different trends, we have some really awesome examples from last year that we saw from a few of our partners. So the first one we have here is from Nest, New York. They did a really great job of having a really impactful offer, 25% throughout the entire period of Cyber Week last year, but they did a really great job of making it feel fresh and new throughout the time. As you mentioned before, we're lucky to be joined by Andrea Moore from Nest, New York. Andrea, thank you so much for joining us. I'm excited to be able to pick your brain on what went behind this strategy. But before we do, I'd love to know a little bit more about your role at Nest and your background.
Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you all in person or virtually as it is. I'm Andrea Moore. I head up e-commerce and digital at Nest New York. And like Harry, I've been through more Black Fridays and Cyber Mondays than I care to count.
Amazing. Well, with that, when we think about last year's Black Friday, Cyber Monday, it was different than any that we had all experienced before. And how did Nest adapt your strategy to the wake of COVID-19? And was there anything that you did drastically different last year than you had done in those many previous Black Friday, Cyber Mondays?
So with Nest, it's very interesting because we're fortunate to have a very broad distribution across specialty stores like Sephora and Ulta, department stores like Neiman Marcus and Nordstrom, specialty boutiques and spas around the country, as well as Amazon. So we have very broad distribution. And, we really saw two things happen last year, dramatic shift to digital in all of our distribution channels at the beginning of COVID and throughout the year. And then secondly, a huge increase in home during the year as people were spending more time at home and shifting dollars away from travel and possibly other categories and into their homes. So we were able to capitalize on both of those things really successfully last year, particularly for our own digital channel.
Yeah, and that's really interesting in terms of, being in the home category. Like you mentioned, shifting funds from travel into, improving people's homes where they were trapped, for lack of a better word.
Right.
Were there any other trends that informed your team's 2020 Cyber Weekend strategy? And, were there any hypotheses that you had with that were either validated or invalidated?
Yeah, and just a little bit more information about what we sell. So we sell fine fragrance, home fragrance, and fragrance technology. So app-based home fragrance devices like app-based diffusers and things like that. And I guess a couple things that we saw last year. One, as we've already alluded to, people started their Thanksgiving offers much earlier in the month. Part of that, I think, was a reaction to Amazon moving their Prime Day to October. And a lot of panic among the big box retailers and department stores around how to not lose dollars to that. And then secondly, we were in a fortunate position where we didn't feel that we needed to start early from an inventory perspective. So we kind of were able to hold our calendar, but that wasn't really the case for a lot of brands who did start early.
Yeah, it's definitely something we've been seeing as well, as this race to start early, and Amazon really threw a wrench in it last year for everyone. But I'm curious, what were some of your main learnings from last year's holiday season, and how are you incorporating those into this year's strategy for Cyber Week?
So some of our big learnings were, like we're saying, the dramatic shift towards mobile. We actually launched our SMS program with Wunderkind the week before Thanksgiving last year, and we immediately saw a big uptick in people signing up for SMS and then the ability to drive revenue through SMS. So that's been something we've been really focused on throughout this entire year. And I always say, like, every major promotional event you do through the year is like a warm up. It's like the playoffs for the Super Bowl, right? So it's like the warm up to Thanksgiving week. So we learn operationally every time we do something how to be as perfect as we can be Thanksgiving week. So we had some learnings around that. We also had to deal with unhappy customers when we were out of stock. So we had some out of stocks last year, just not being able to anticipate the huge shift in volume towards our business. So that's something we've been working through this year as well, with back in stock messaging and also looking at inventory levels in a different way.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. And I know inventory is top of mind, especially for everyone this year as well. So interested to hear more about that. Thank you, Andrea, for answering these questions. Everybody stay tuned. We have a lot more questions for Andrea coming up and questions from you all as well. But before we get there, I have a few more client examples that I'd love to walk you all through of how to best approach those audiences we talked about. So next up, we have an example from Casper. Casper did a really great job of driving early engagement for their Black Friday sale by starting it really early. They started a week ahead of time. And with high AOV purchases like mattresses, it's very unlikely that people are going to be buying multiple mattresses over Black Friday, Cyber Monday. So it was really important that they kind of get ahead of the noise. And you can see the subject line of this message was "Beat the Black Friday Rush," and let their audience know what their offers were before their inbox got crowded with other messaging. The other thing to keep in mind here is they kept everything very simple and mobile first. You can easily read this on a slide, but if it was on your phone, it would also be easy to read, and it was simple, fast to load, which is really important. The next thing that we see when we look at how they used a different owned channel, which is text messaging, you can see that they simplified that copy we just saw and kept it short and pithy. And these perform really well, especially on this high visibility channel. You can see how they weaved the sale topic directly into imagery, which is another smart way to get mobile subscribers' attention. During this period, they're going to be getting, your mobile audience is going to be getting a lot of text messages from other brands. So keeping it straight, simple, and easy to understand is all the more important. In the next example, we're going to be looking at how to really approach those procrastinators, so that second bucket we were talking about, with an example from our partner Corksicle. So you can see from this example immediately that Corksicle was really focused on driving these like final sale reminder messages, incorporating a lot of urgency, right? There's only hours left to save, using a countdown timer in this messaging, making it really clear, oh my gosh, I've only got 5 hours left to make this purchase before I don't get this offer. When we look at how they approach this from the text messaging channel, Corksicle used subtle animations to engage the mobile subscribers and alert them to the end of the cyber sale. After building up their sale over the course of the week, Corksicle texted their subscribers during the final hours of their sale, saying, these are your final reminders, get these sales before they're gone. The one thing we would recommend is if you are using the text message channel, if you're gonna be sending these kinds of messages, make sure to exclude anybody who has purchased since your sale started, so that they're not getting messaged about a sale that they already took advantage of. So now that we've taken a look at the data and we've taken a look at how to use that data to make some really impactful strategies, we want to break it down into 3 simple takeaways that we recommend that we learned from last year, right? The first is be mobile first, right? We've been hearing this for a while now, but it is ever more important than before. This means legible emails that load quickly, clear landing page experiences, easy checkouts, and robust text messaging strategies. The second is adapt your messaging across the weekend, right? We just walked through how there's different people in different states of mind coming to your site. And by understanding what their frame of mind is, take advantage of that and message them the kind of messaging we walked through where, you know, get it before it's gone and our sale ends soon. Finally, optimize your send time based off of the peak traffic hours that we walked through. You know, make sure your emails and texts are visible by sending when users are most likely to be on those devices and shopping around. And don't miss out on texting your list during those peak traffic hours as well. Great. So we hope that was helpful going through some of those trends and some of those recommendations, but I will now pass it over to Trey, who will walk through the importance of email and text abandonment during Cyber Weekend.
All right, hello everyone. Super excited to be here. My name is Trey. I am one of the product marketing leads here, focusing on our text and email products. So excited to walk you through some of the strategies that we hope to drive with these products. I also worked on the customer success team for 2 years. In fact, I think I have a few of my old clients on the call. So hello, good to see your faces, or I guess not see your faces, but good to know you're here. So like Harry said, I'm gonna start with talking through some text and abandonment insights from last year. All right, we're a little bit delayed on the transitions, but the main key takeaway here is email becomes more important during Cyber Weekend. No surprise, but we know that prospects and customers are eager to hear directly about the deals that you're offering from you. This is why owned-in channels are so critical during this period. As these users shop around, we know that email traffic can become less productive. And this is where having that really strong optimized abandonment program is going to come in clutch. So if we look to our right on the graph, we see total email contribution to sessions and revenue across 400 of our clients. And you can see that in a standard week, we have around 13% and 16% coming from sessions and revenue respectively, where that jumps to 20% for sessions and 22% of revenue. So around a 55% lift in sessions during this period and a 34% lift in revenue. Clearly, this is an effective way to engage your customers and make sure that they have your offers top of mind, even when they are having competing offers from other brands in their inbox during this high volume time. So we also see that text becomes more important, and we expect the contribution here to increase this year. We know texts are a great way to keep your deals top of mind, But as Harry alluded to earlier, more brands have invested in text message marketing over the last year than ever before, which means it's going to be even more important to make sure that your strategy is on point for the 2021 season. For our graph here, we see the same graph as last time, but this time just excluding to text messaging. And we see a jump from 4% of sessions and 5% of revenue to 7% of sessions and 7.4% of revenue. So a huge lift in sessions and quite a substantial lift in revenue as well. And we expect overall this to increase as more brands, get their text strategy on point, and also as more customers kind of become used to engaging with this channel as in a way that they actually want to convert, not just become aware of deals that their different brands that they're subscribed to are offering. So coming up next. Oh, I'm very delayed. So what we're going to go back to, here we are. All right, so on this side, what we can see is cart abandonment skyrockets during Cyber Weekend. This is no real surprise. We know that there are many different people shopping around during this period and using their carts as a way to save items that they're interested in. Despite lift in conversion rate, we really see this noticeable peak over the last year's Cyber Weekend, which goes to show people are becoming distracted despite taking that high intent action of adding that item to cart. This is where having that strong abandonment program and personalized emails and texts are critical, because we know when you have that personalized information and content top of mind, that is your best way of getting someone to come back to your site. And you are all already in a good place as our client base, because we do see that Wunderkind clients see 37% more email revenue during this weekend than the e-commerce average. So in their annual recap of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, Adobe Analytics reported that 16% of all Black Friday Cyber Monday revenue for the different e-commerce and retailer sites that they surveyed came from email. With unmatched identification and more robust list growth, our clients, on the other hand, can be confident that they're outperforming the industry standard and getting the most of this own channel. So here we see that for that 16% that most retailers expect, our clients are driving 22% of revenue. The delta that is driving that being that really strong identification rate, as well as the ability to make sure that all of your programs are optimized with industry best practices in mind that we have implemented with your client success team. So Andrea, I wanted to ask you a question at this point. I know we talked about how some of your email examples and how Nest had done a really great job of optimizing that channel over the last period. Now that you guys have added text messaging to the mix, I'm wondering, how are you planning to adapt your strategy now that you have been live with this channel for over a year?
We really look at the revenue that comes in from email and SMS together, because we've seen already such a dramatic shift in percentage of sales coming from SMS, and it's growing. And we also look at the overlap between email subscribers and SMS subscribers. And what we're really trying to balance is what the touch points are for people where we know they're subscribed for both. Another thing we're really looking at is how are we leveraging SMS more in a more unique and kind of a more intimate way, right? So we don't want to just take the email content we have and like copy and paste it into an SMS or an MMS. So we're trying to make that content a little more personalized and unique, because the relationship is different. And one specific example is, we will occasionally run a sale, a promotion, and we will give our VIPs early access. And we're kind of talking and looking at what does that messaging look like for SMS, and how do we make that unique and different?
Yeah, that's a really great insight. I think we've seen a lot of success when brands do kind of take that VIP approach to their text messaging channel and letting users know that it's not just because it is a bit more intimate, there are also benefits associated with that. And it's a good way to make sure that they are continuing to be engaged and respond to those texts while still kind of keeping your offers top of mind in a way that's translated and perhaps makes more sense than an email.
For sure, and we really don't want people to unsubscribe. So we want to really not over message for SMS, and also watch and manage our send times.
Yeah, great point. And that actually ties into some of my main key takeaways and considerations for this section. So first off, as we already spoke through, we want to make sure that we're maximizing our own channels. So like I said, email and text, clearly based on how people are interacting with these channels over this period, are the best way to communicate with your customers. So make sure that you are keeping them top of mind from the beginning to the end of your Cyber Weekend strategy. The next is ensuring list health before this period. So we know that we want to have as much of a robust list and mailable audience during this time. And this is where you can kind of take the approach of segmenting out users who are disengaged before this period to give them a little bit of a break, so they stick around for your Cyber Weekend messaging and different deals that you're offering, just like Andrea was talking about. And then lastly, cadence is key. So we know we had some great data that Harry presented on how to engage your audience during the actual weekend, but it is important to consider, how is your offer structured? When is it ending? When is your shipping cutoff? And then perhaps work backwards from there based on when you should both start your offer and then making sure that kind of throughout that period you are building to the end, so when are the critical touch points to send those more mass communications in order to make sure your people are getting into those abandonment programs that we know are the best way to get them to convert. So I would like to ask a few more questions that were raised to us with you, Andrea, before we get into some questions from the audience. The first one is, what do you think is a common mistake that other brands make when planning for this cyber season, whether it's the weekend or the time leading up to it? Any insights you have would be helpful here.
Yeah, I guess I would say three things. One, look at the entire fourth quarter. Like, don't put everything into that 1 week. And to the extent you can diversify your portfolio and get sales in at any point in time during the fourth quarter, I think that's a win, especially this year with so much concern about supply chain and logistics. I think people are starting earlier again this year. I think it's very, it's the reality that, brands have products that are, stuck on boats, and FedEx is going to be challenged to deliver this year in a way that we haven't seen before. So I would say three things again. Don't, look at sales across the entire quarter. Second thing, make your offer as simple as possible for customers to understand and for your team to execute. Don't try anything tricky, or don't do anything for the first time Thanksgiving weekend that you haven't tried before in some way. And the third thing I would say is have a backup plan. So if you really see that your sales are not lining up to where you need them to be, have something in your back pocket that's ready to go that you can pull the trigger on, whether that's Sunday night or Cyber Monday, or some people even extend into Cyber Tuesday or Giving Tuesday, so have a backup plan in case you're not getting to where you need to be.
Yeah, that's some really great advice. And I know a lot of our customers have been asking us, with different, supply chain shortages or challenges that we're facing, how are you recommending that you tailor your strategy around that? And I think, just like you said, kind of planning early and then perhaps planning backwards, so you don't get to that Cyber Tuesday moment and you're like, oh shit, we haven't hit our sales target. It gives you a lot more leeway and agency to kind of make the most out of those last few days.
Yeah, and also I think if consumers are going to start buying earlier, they only have a finite amount of money they're going to spend. So when they're in market, you want them to be focusing on you as opposed to your competitor or another category.
Yeah, that's a really great point. That actually leads into my next question, which is, how can brands stand out from the crowd when we know so many of your competitors, as well as just other, brands that are offering, attractive offers during this time? And as you said, consumers only have so much money that they can spend during this time. How can, other brands stand out during this time?
I think one thing that could be interesting this year is that because product is going to be scarce for some people, we may see people who are a little less promotional this year because they don't have the number of units needed to really be promotional. And so we may see some people being able to hold a higher margin and be a little bit less promotional. So that I think could be interesting, depends on the product you sell and what your category is like. But I think that could be interesting. I think, also, I think shipping cutoffs will be earlier this year than normal. I'm usually the person that wants to push the shipping cutoff until the absolute last possible minute, but I don't think that's going to be so wise this year. So I think December is going to be a very short month. So if you can activate in October, I would say, really try and go for it.
Yeah, that's very good advice. And I think another thing that I noticed from your discount strategy last year, which stood out to me, and I think as a consumer is always interesting, is just how the deal changes. So you kept the 5% offer, but you had different gifts associated and kind of changed throughout. And I think especially for, an occasional repeat customer of the same brand over the weekend, that can be a good way to entice them and say like, hey, there's actually still more to get, even when I've actually already activated the offer. So that's one thing that stood out to me as well.
Yeah, and if you're like me, you spend the beginning part of the week shopping for yourself and looking at all the deals and figuring out what you want to buy. And then you spend the back half of the weekend like buying things for other people. And we do see people come back multiple times throughout the week, whether they're, making shipments to one place and then another, gifts sent to one family and then to another, for example. And I think there are also people, that we saw in the chart who do wait until Cyber Monday still to, see if there's any last, awesome deals out there. So we do try to sort of offer something for those people who are holding out. I mean, the reality is you may not get the inventory you want, but you may get something special. So
right. Yeah, that's a good insight. So the last question that I had was, we expect, Cyber Weekend and Black Friday, Cyber Monday to continue to be important for, many more years to come. But one thing that our leader and CEO often talks about is how brands miss out on the opportunity to create their own marketing calendar and essentially wait until the last day or Cyber Weekend to be promotional and have that like really critical moment of engagement with their customers. So as you were talking about earlier, and I think Ness is a brand that does that particularly well, what is your guys' approach to creating your own marketing calendar and different moments of engagement throughout the year, so that it's not just all we wait for Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then don't expect, any good deals from us in the interim?
Right. So I think from a brand perspective, we'd like to lean into things like launches, new product launches, and storytelling throughout the year to really keep engagement high and to keep to be top of mind throughout the year when people are making their purchase decisions. If you've ever worked with me in any place I've been, that Thanksgiving starts on January 1. Like you've really got to be thinking about the beginning, from the beginning of the year, what that week and that month and that quarter are going to look like. But I think engagement is an ongoing thing. And I think from a brand perspective, you have your own storytelling. And then from a consumer perspective, you need to know when they're interested, right? So we have a lot of behavioral data about when people have come to the site, when they've purchased, when they haven't, when their birthday is, when their product sale anniversary, when their anniversary of when they bought something with us is, when they've signed up for SMS. So, we try to leverage that data to make the communication process more intimate and more one-to-one with consumers, so that the messaging is relevant at the time when they're interested in us.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point. Obviously, music to our ears, since that's where we spend a lot of the time. But it's true that the best time to meet a customer is when they are most interested and on your website, and that's why we see a lot of success from the abandonment programs, not only during the Cyber Weekend time, but also throughout the year. So kind of marrying that with a strong product launch strategy, as well as different moments of celebration, like a customer's birthday, or just they've been subscribing to you, is a really, really good way to kind of think of that throughout the year rather than just in November.
Well, also too, how are you going to use Q4 to drive Q1, right? So we're going to all acquire a whole bunch of new customers in the next few months, weeks. We're also going to activate customers who maybe haven't bought with us for a while, and we're going to keep high value customers, have them keep on doing what they're doing. But like, what are the strategies going to be to get them to come back and buy in Q1? And so I'll give you one specific example that we're doing. So we're launching a new product in Q1, and we're going to be sampling that product during Thanksgiving week. For those who make a purchase during Thanksgiving week, they'll get to test that product well ahead of when you can buy it. And so the biggest time of the year is the most traffic we'll have, the most eyeballs on the website. And so how do we capitalize on that for something that's coming down the road? So I think it's important, we have to focus so much on these, next 10 weeks or so, but the weeks after that are right around the corner. So what are we doing then?
That's a great point. So it sounds like we're just going to have you back for another webinar. And
see how Q4 really goes.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Andrea. I know that was insightful for me. I'm sure a lot of our webinar attendees feel the same. Really appreciate you sharing some of those insights and help us look a little bit more forward as well as backward for what will inevitably be an interesting year. Megan, do you want to take it from here?
Yes. Thank you so much, Trey, Andrea, and Harry. This was so insightful. I learned a lot. We do have a few questions in the chat that we have some time for. I'm reading in real time, but I think this first one probably could be best answered by Harry. What would you say the conversion variance is when comparing SMS and MMS? Would it be better to send an MMS during this time versus an SMS, or does it not really matter in your opinion?
Yeah, I think this is a fantastic question. And I think it's one a lot of marketers are asking themselves, especially during this period. And the key thing to keep in mind is, is that conversion variance enough to justify the additional cost that MMS does incur? And I would say, yes, it does. The conversion variance is better, but it depends on how impactful you're using the imagery, right? Just like a general imagery of product during this period, maybe not the most effective, but going through some of the examples that we saw today, using actual live countdown timers that are just kind of a GIF, right, that work, or making sure that your sale is front and center so that maybe they don't even need to read the actual text if the image is impactful enough, and we'll see higher conversion through that. So I think the answer is it depends. And if you do lean towards MMS, just make sure that the image is as impactful and easy to read as possible.
Great. Thank you, Harry. This other one's super interesting. Might be best answered by Andrea, but I will open it to the group. Given that Black Friday, Cyber Monday promotions aren't changing as much between the actual Black Friday, Cyber Monday dates, how important is it to continue labeling sales with Black Friday, Cyber Monday language?
So, I guess I could say from our perspective, we really look at that week as a campaign, and we keep that messaging consistent throughout that week, that campaign, to, again, keep the messaging clear, simple, straightforward, and have one task to cover with our customer service team, our creative teams, marketing, etc. Also, it gets messy if you need to change your performance media to match new creative. So I go back to keep it simple, and I think it's a language it's a shorthand consumers really understand, and I would stay consistent with it.
Yeah, I think it's a great question because we're right at this verge of like, is that language still important? But one of the things like we've seen as it expands is, and also with kind of what we've been through in the last year and a half, there have been more promotions at kind of non-normal cadences. So we're still generally recommending to use some of those cues so that people know this is the big one, right? Like this is where I should get on versus this is maybe part of something that was more evergreen or this was something different. So, but I think it'll be an interesting one to look at afterwards to see if this is the year where we move past that, where everybody knows that language.
Great. And I have one last question from the chat and I think we kind of touched on this throughout the webinar, but how early should you begin messaging your customers on Black Friday, Cyber Monday? Maybe a hybrid answer here, Trey, Andrea?
Yeah. Oop. Got some reverb. I went off mute. So can you turn off the volume? Thank you. Sorry, Zoom logistics are always an interesting thing to figure out, especially when you're in the same room. But essentially, yeah, what I would recommend is kind of thinking through your product category. As we saw with Casper, unlikely that someone is going to make multiple purchases for a mattress. I mean, maybe there are some people out there buying for their whole family, which I'm sure Casper would love. But I think in that case, it is important to start early and make sure that you're not losing out to your competitors or perhaps better deals that other customers are offering. I think if you know that you're going to deal with some shipping logistics as well, or you have a shipping cutoff that you want to keep top of mind so you don't potentially upset customers that don't get their goods on time, I think that's going to be especially a big thing that people are fearing this year. I know we've heard from a lot of our customers, so I think there's definitely an opportunity to start it early, as long as you feel that you can kind of support it from making sure you will have inventory by the time that the actual Black Friday period comes up.
Right. Any feedback? Okay, I think that concludes our webinar today on Cyber Weekend, the trend shaping 2021. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to reach out to your CSM. They will be happy to help. On behalf of Wunderkind, thank you very much for joining, and a special thank you to Andrea from Nest New York for joining us today. We look forward to a very successful holiday season with you all and seeing you on the next Live from 75 webinar. Take care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.